Welcome back to the Belonging Place, where we talk about connection and belonging and gathering as an anecdote to loneliness and addiction and other things. And I'm really excited for this episode today. So I'm bringing back my best friend, Alycesun Marie Clare, and actually she is going to be the host of this episode. Welcome, Alycesun.
Thank you.
And
you.
with that, I'm gonna turn the time over to you.
Yes. Oh, this is the dream right here. I've been collecting my thoughts. First off, first and foremost, I would love for you to share what has brought about. I know there's 20 billion things that have come to play, but what would you say finally instigated the I want to start the belonging place? Where did that hit?
Good question. I'm not sure how many people listening to this are familiar with StoryCorps. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about StoryCorps. So they decided that, like a lot of people, that people's stories really matter and people's stories need to be captured. And I came across StoryCorps a couple years ago and just was infatuated with this idea. They actually had a mobile recording studio that was set up like this, just like so two mics, and people could come in and they could interview each other, like a husband and a wife or a mom and a daughter or whatever, and they would record it and then they would upload it. And of course they wrote a book about it and anything. But the outcroppings of that became so miraculous because a daughter and a father that were interviewed, the dad died suddenly. And so in their book they just like treasured those stories. And it became something to me. Legacy is just really important to me as a single person, just like always thinking about how to capture how to have things live on beyond you when you don't have any progeny, right? When you don't, like, what do you do? So there was this idea from StoryCorps of like capturing moments that live on because they're recorded, meets the like gift that I feel like I have in my life with some incredible friends. I mean, just really talented, amazing. I don't even, the words are getting lost on me, just friends. And through the years, I have a lot of different friends in different places. And I just have learned to be, I guess, a good listener. And there's the value from being a good listener is people share. They share their stories. And when people are vulnerable, it allows other people to be vulnerable, and creating safe spaces where people can be vulnerable became something that I kind of am obsessed with. It actually ends up being the thing that I do as a therapist. So great people, great stories meets recording and having a legacy became like, man, if I could just turn a mic on and have pretty much the same kind of conversations that I actually have in my day-to-day life, really big and really small, really generative and really simple, stories, then wouldn't that be cool for me to have them and for them to have them? And as a byproduct, wouldn't it be cool for other people to listen in? Kind of like a fly on the wall.
Absolutely.
That was a long story short, but that became the bee in the bonnet that was like, get something together where you can sit with your friends and talk about them and share their stories, and where other people can also get to know them. And then there was a lot of, like anything, a lot of work that went into behind the scenes. I went to podcast school. I'll give a shout out to Richie Stedman, who helped me. I call it podcast school. He doesn't call it that. There was connecting with my producer, Tommy. There was like finding the right people at the right time. But there was a lot of figuring out what I really wanted to talk about. When it really came down to it, it's just hard, right? Because I have lots of friends in lots of places. And I was like, what's a universal through line that I'm enough passionate about that I want to sit and talk about episode after episode after episode, but that connects enough people? And it ended up being this, right? Like, what does it mean to belong? And I think I wanted the challenge of coming up with a hypothesis of what people would say and then do it, and then see if that hypothesis, like a null hypothesis, right? So I have some ideas of what I think people, some similar things that I think people are going to say, and then I kind of like want to test that out. And after you've done enough episodes, come back and be like, yeah, these are some of the ideas that I thought would come out, and either they did or like, wow, this was so different. This experiment went really different. So.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I love what you kind of pulled in this idea that I want to go into. We're going to come back to belonging place, but you have an absolute gift of pulling in beautiful people.
Oh,
and
thank
it's
you.
because of who you are. You have a gift of allowing so many people in various walks of life to really hone in on themselves. And you're that wind. I tease, but you are the wind beneath their wings, right? Like you're that person.
If I didn't get paid to be the wind,
Oh,
I
girl,
tell people, I'd be rich.
you be loaded because it is just an authentic gift.
I love it.
But with that, I'm curious where that came from.
Yeah.
And where the intention for finding and being such an incredible friend came from.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's specifically about finding and being a good friend. But my life was irrevocably changed when I was 19. I think up to that point, I think I always had a belief inside of me that I knew who I was, and I knew that I was a daughter of God, and that knowledge, I said this on an earlier podcast, is like a saving knowledge. And because I had that assurity, I didn't feel like I really needed to like be in any kind of group. Does that make sense? I didn't have to be a popular kid. So I guess I got the freedom to just like be friends with everybody. And because I was sort of friends with everybody, I didn't think much about, I didn't have to try really hard, I guess, to make friends. I also am the oldest of 8 children, so like I have my own built-in
they were available.
friends. They were available.
Totally.
But the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at BYU, it's interesting. I was on a date with a friend of mine that got his LDS mission call to, I think, Korea, and we were at a Korean restaurant, and I grew up in Oregon, and he happened to be down in Utah, so he's like, let's go to dinner. And we were sitting at dinner, and I had this just feeling, so strong feeling in my gut. We were supposed to finish dinner and go to a movie. We had tickets. Before we went to the movie, I said, I need to call home. It was very strong. And I called home, and neither of my parents were available, but my grandma was there. Somebody was there. It's kind of blurry. And somebody said something about like, we can't find Grant. Something has happened. And so I immediately had him drive me home. And then I think it was my uncle. I don't know. I was like, I need to go be where my parents are. And so my sister and I, who's 2 years younger than me, so I was 19 and she's 17, we went to the canal, which is where my brother and his best friend had been rafting, I think, down the canal or something. And as the story is told by his best friend at the time, they got out of the canal and my brother went to go get a ball or something. And the canal, it's like an irrigation canal, right? And so there's like this big siphon where this was down by Riverwoods, if you're familiar with Provo or Orem. It would go under the road that was Center Street and go out and pops out the other side. There's this culvert, they call it. And my brother, the sides of the water's a lot faster than you'd think. And so he couldn't stand up in it, and then the sides of the culvert were really slippery, and so his best friend went to go like grab his hand, but he couldn't hold him, and my brother ended up drowning. And I stood there with my parents, and it was the worst moment of my life to watch my parents lose their son. And there's probably more I could say about that story, but what happened to me as the 19-year-old was I feel like I split into, I feel like there was the before my brother died, and then there was after my brother died. And thank goodness I had a good relationship with my brother, and I was working on things with him, and so I didn't have like that feeling. But I remember distinctly seeing my brother on a Saturday morning, and my brother drowned on Pioneer Day in Utah. That's a big holiday.
Huge holiday.
It was a Saturday. It was a holiday. My brother had wanted to run the Desert News run that year and had bugged all of us. We hadn't registered, but we were like, okay. And just like the day in the life of my family, just noisy, loud. I was home from school, just visiting. And then by the end of that night, he just was gone. And my brother had, I'm sure, we think ADHD or autism or maybe both, and just was so loud. He filled every ounce of the
Yeah. Every space.
every space of the, and so that was my long story, but an important story to say that from the minute that I walked away from that canal, I said to myself, sorry, I said, I will never let anybody ever wonder if I love them. Ever. I think my brother knew I loved him, but to have somebody and then to not have somebody so dramatically, it was just jarring. And it began. The intention, when you asked me my intention, from that minute forward, and probably like anybody in my life at the time, annoyingly so. I got really anxious about people saying goodbye to me. And so I would always hug them and say, I love you, kind of obsessively.
Yeah.
And that turned into anytime I made new friends, I didn't just want them to know that I love them. So I said, I love you a lot. I love maybe more than most people. I said the words, I love you. And I think for some of my friends, that was awkward for them. I don't think they didn't like it per se, but I think it was awkward for them that I used that word so freely.
Got it.
Because most of them had kept that for romantic relationships and maybe even in their families. Because I remember people in my life, I could just tell that when I freely all the time, I love you, we're kind of like, okay.
Okay, bye.
I didn't know how to say I love you back. And
Right.
but I didn't just want people to know I love them. I wanted people to know what I loved about them. Like,
that.
what is it about you that I like? And so I started to write cards or notes, and I started to verbalize. This is before we had phones, everybody.
Yeah. Hello.
And there was no texting, but I started to be like, if I were to die tomorrow,
Right.
and people were sad, I would hope people would be sad. But if I died tomorrow, this was at 19, this was at 20, I wouldn't want anybody to wonder, like, what was my relationship with her? And that became sort of whatever you want to call it, a passion, a driving sense that has never left me. I think it's calmed down.
It's amazing.
And I think the people that are close to me that I've kept, like you, for like 20 years, they just know it about me, and they just like, they don't know really anything different. So they're just like, that's Kylee. But did I answer the question?
Absolutely.
But people love to be seen, and people love to be given genuine compliments. And I think people love to know that they matter.
Yeah.
And before I became a therapist, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
I just knew from a selfish place, maybe not from a selfish place, but from a place of fear, maybe, that everything is temporary. It's kind of sad, but it became it's still a fracture in my life. I think I have a little bit more grief and a little bit more death. I've had a lot more other death experiences in my family, but by the time I was 19, I had lost both of my grandparents and an aunt and my brother. So lots of death. And so for me, I just knew that life and time on this life, both spiritually and otherwise, is so short. Yeah. And that if we have a limited amount of time, you better tell people what you feel about them, right? They better know how you care, and don't wait, because you don't always get a chance, right?
You don't know. I love that. I love that in so many ways, because I love that the experience brought about the intentionality.
I call it Grant's gift.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to it. And it's funny that having not ever met Grant.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah.
Because of what it has brought for me in my life with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's special, that's the legacy that comes from that. Before we deter from that, I want to ask the grief. Yeah. That's deep. It's very intense. Yeah. What would you say, what have you pulled from that grief with losing Grant?
Yeah. Besides this, Grant's gift, which I think is the best thing that's ever come from it, was just the hold your people close, but not just for a season, for always.
Always.
Don't tell them once, tell them all the time, right? I feel there is such an assurance in my life with my friends and people. It's like, they know. Yeah. They know. Yeah. Yes. If something happens to me, they know that, it's freeing.
So
So
free
that
and so
that
safe.
is kind of selfish in its own way. It's just
Yeah.
like people know I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I think just grief
Mm.
of I think grief has a lot of empathy in it.
Mm.
I remember the first time that I was at EFY and there was a counselor there whose brother had been killed in a motorcycle accident and we were both there and he was working and
Mm.
he decided not to go home because I think he had just a little bit more time and he was playing the guitar one day and you could tell he was just devastated and it was the first time I told my story about my brother to somebody who
Mm.
I felt like I could finally use my grief for good, I guess. It wasn't just about me being sad and about me having lost something or about my family, but it was the first time that I remember that I could really be empathetic with somebody else. And we ended up kind of like crying and laughing. And he told me later, he's like, it was just so permission giving to like sit with somebody who got it and that wasn't kind of hand holding me and wasn't trying to figure it out and was just sitting and was real. And
Yeah.
I remember telling him things that people said at my brother's funeral that were so annoying. And he was like, and we could relate.
Yeah.
Like just the only two people who had lost,
Yes.
you know, siblings. So I think that one of the things that my brother's death or his grief, my grief for his death brought me connection in a way that I don't think I could have had without it. One of the gifts that my brother's death gave me spiritually was I remember, and I just described this to everybody who would listen, but I remember when my brother died that the church or God or Christ just didn't seem to matter. Like it was just earth shattering. I remember thinking that if you describe the church or the gospel or the scriptures or whatever,
Sure.
any kind of Christianity, it was like a wall bricks that I had built by the time I was 19.
Yeah.
I've done these good things. I got baptized.
Check.
You know, I believe in resurrection.
Yeah.
They had built this wall, and when my brother died, the whole wall just came crumbling
Gone.
down. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much you read your scriptures. It does not matter
Yep.
that you go to church. Like, why would any of that matter? But what was left when the whole wall fell down was Christ.
Yeah. Oh.
Like the very bottom of the foundation that was immovable,
Yes.
right? The wall came crumbling down.
Unchanging.
And none of those other things seem to matter. And I'm not sure if they should. I mean, they are important outward manifestations of our covenants and our obedience, but I became very dependent on grace.
Oh, I love that.
And I became very dependent on commitments, covenants, decisions that I had made. I remember feeling like I stood on a precipice of like, I'm either going to choose God or I'm not going to choose God. This is it.
Right.
It doesn't get any harder. I don't think, really. And grateful for me in my life that I chose God. But that put my beliefs to the test. Before that had happened, it was easy to believe in the resurrection because it was a great idea. Yeah. When my brother died in the scriptures, it talks about the sting of death, and I remember thinking, man, it is stingy, right? Yeah. I think we went to church the next day, and the hymn that they were singing, because it was July 24th, right? So it was Pioneer songs. They were singing "Come, Come, Ye Saints." There's a line in that I'll never forget being in church that day that said, "And should we die before our journey's through, all is well." And I was like, all is not well in Zion.
This is not a good thing. This is not a good thing.
But over time and over experiences, the sting is less stingy, and obviously the principle of eternal life and all that comes with that. I would say the grief brought me closer to my Savior, and
I love
those are a few things.
I think they're beautiful. I think it shows up. It really does tie in all those pieces of your story, of your life, and all the places as you talked about this recording legacy, recording stories. I love that we get to have pieces of Grant's story because it's so integral.
Connection is born out of disconnect, right?
Big time.
Or the opposite, connection is born out of grief.
Big time.
I think they're kind of...
They are.
Inseparable. I've told you this before. One of my favorite stories comes from a book that I love called Making Loss Matter by a rabbi. David Wolpe. And in there, he talks about a neighbor who says, "Hey, neighbor, do you love me?" And the neighbor says, "Of course I love you." The other neighbor says, "Do you know my pain?" And the other neighbor says, "No, I don't know your pain." And the neighbor says, "How can you love me if you don't know my pain?"
Yep.
Right?
There it is. And I think that it correlates so deeply because I think we start in our lives wanting things to not be part of, like, we don't want to deal with the grief part of it.
No, we don't want hard.
We don't want hard.
Please no.
And yet, my gosh, when it shows up, not only is it some of the most hellish experience that you have, it breeds the most beautiful.
It's transformative.
It's just amazing. Well, and within that, I want to step away a little bit, but it still is this concept that I love that you've shared with me before, the creating wells.
Yeah.
And the reason I love it, and I want to hear how it came about, is this idea of, like, it's not just building the space, it's the process of building. It's the process of creating. And I just want you to share more about this creating wells concept.
Yeah. So I started getting asked, like, about being single when I hit about 25 or 26, whoever, people.
Totally.
Well, I'm single. And I started to feel, I had this inherent concept inside of me, for the good or the bad, that if we have a purpose, if God's given each of us a purpose on the earth, then my purpose as a single person cannot be less than the purpose of the mother with 5 kids.
Absolutely.
How could it be less? Because I don't believe in a God who sees me as less for what I don't have.
Correct.
Therefore, that translates into, I have the same work as the mom of a 5-year-old, but I don't have 5 kids. But I don't have 5 kids.
Right.
That work, like, I've never been a mother, but I've been a therapist of teens, and I'm an auntie, and I've been around people enough. Absolutely. I know as much as I can know without being it, the work that it takes to be a mom, a father also, right?
Yes,
a parent.
yes.
That's a lot of work. So I, from a pretty early on single age, felt the responsibility, like I said, for the good or bad. Nobody told me this, but that, like, the responsibility of a mother of 5. Yeah. Build the kingdom. Yeah. Like, you have the same amount of time. Yeah. And if your time isn't going into your kids, where's it going?
Where's it going?
Yeah.
I love
and
that.
That is where I started to be like, what can I offer? I had one other experience that really led to this idea. So while I was on my mission, my grandma was really, like, in the LDS church, they have, like, companionships that they would go and teach people. And her companionship partner was Janice Cat Perry, who's a famous musician, not just in the LDS church, but does other things. And Janice Cat Perry wrote me a letter on my mission. My grandma asked her to. And in the letter, well, my grandma gave her some of my music that I wrote before I went on my mission, which was very nice of her. But in the letter, Janice Cat Perry said to me, Kylee, she's like, I need you to know that in your life, whether it's music or whatever it is, it's important that you paint your corner of the world in only the way that you know how. And then she goes to talk about like how she didn't start writing primary or young women's songs until she was like 32 or 36, way older than most people think. Right. And that was the beginning of her writing experience, and that she wasn't some famous. She just wrote for the young women's in her ward. And then that became, people liked it. And then, and so her wisdom on my mission to say, like, don't try to be like anybody else. Yeah. But you have a responsibility to, lift where you stand. Absolutely. And that, I think the combination of that responsibility I'd given myself from God, that was like, build the kingdom, and her just like, do it your way. I felt, when nobody else was creating the places, there was just like this place in the church where it's like, okay, I'm 26 and I'm kind of in the middle of my young single adult war, but also like, what's the function? I served a mission and I didn't get married, and like, where's the alt path? There's an alt path. Is it this way? It just felt like it was like done. I'm done with school. I'm done with life. It's like, what do I do? Yeah. And when nobody else was building the things, I just was like, I guess I'll do it. It didn't come from any like other place. It was just like, I guess I'll build it. Yeah. And at the beginning, it was just like gatherings, people come, music nights, things like that. I guess I'll bring places, I'll start places where people come together. And then it became a lot more business and nonprofits and other things after that. But I think that generative part of me that was like, put value in the world. it's not about you. A lot of people, I think, get really stuck, single people particularly,
Yeah.
on them because they can, because you have the time,
You have
because
the
you end
time.
up having the money, right? And I
Absolutely.
was like,
Yep.
okay, I still want to do that. I want to become my best me.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think the other thing that I like, it's a selfish thing, is the more wells that I create, the more people I get to meet.
Absolutely.
The more generative I get to, my other best friend Hillary calls it spin. I
Yeah.
get to sit with people and we get to spin,
I love
right? Like
that.
we get to talk about
Yeah.
things in a way that,
Yeah.
and your story becomes a part of my story. And
Yeah.
how would I meet you or find you otherwise,
Yeah,
right? Like
I
we would
love
not have
that.
known each other except
Yeah.
for EFY,
Yeah.
this well that somebody else built,
Correct.
and that we were able to come and
Gather
join.
around
And,
it.
yeah.
Absolutely. I love that idea. And I love the idea of those touch points, because you're right that the willingness to create those places is a willingness, again, in a space to build a legacy where people can continue to come and be a part of. It's funny because as you were sharing, I kept thinking about your like how innate it is with you, like how natural it is. You're like, I think you forget perhaps that it's not as natural for people in their state of life to
Yeah.
go, I'm going to create something where people can come together and be a part of this, and I think it's infectious. I think that is one of the most beautiful parts of your soul gift, is that it infects others, and others go into those spaces. And I've watched it for the last 2 decades of our friendship, where you've created a well, and people who are now a part of that have now gone to create their wells, right?
Yeah.
And I love that.
I
So
hope.
no,
It's generative, right?
It's generative. It's exciting.
Permission giving.
Yes.
I'm gonna do a thing, and I'm not even qualified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like on an earlier episode, you talked about doing the dance thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have a dance degree.
No, absolutely not.
But it's like, start something that matters. By the way, that's a great book. I'm gonna shout out Blake
yeah.
Mykowski. Start something that matters.
Yeah.
And just do it. Do it not when you're ready, not when everything's great. Just like, it's your idea.
Start the idea.
I say this a lot. I probably said this on almost episode, but Sterling Sill wrote books, a series of books called Leadership, and he says, it's stuck in my brain and my heart since I read it. But he says most ideas die en route. And when I read that,
So
I was
accurate.
like, no,
Yeah.
I will not be that person.
Yeah.
I will not be that person.
Yeah.
I am capable, and if I can't do it, I will find the people.
Yeah.
I will conspire for good.
Build it.
There is something inside of me that says,
Yeah.
let's start it. Let's do it. And the crazy thing is, like you said, I have watched, like, when I do it or start it, other people are like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, if she's doing it,
It's
I'll
permission
give me
giving.
permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'll go. I love that. Well, and within that, there's the buzzword that's going to show up for me, and you had mentioned it in one of our chats a while ago, but it connects to this in the fact that, all right, so you create something, you create a well. What shows up when it fails?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
like
gosh.
what happens when the best of ideas, the best of experiences, or even avenues that we take, like the single mind, right? When we're single, we always are trying to recreate our story. Like, okay, well, that didn't work, but I'm now, I'm in my 20s and these are the feelings. Here's the grief. Now I'm in my 30s. Now here's the grief, right?
Yeah.
But so as you're creating these wells, what do you do with failure?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about one very specific one, because I'm not sure that a lot of people in my life know what an epic fail this was, because I didn't announce it to everybody. But so I decided at an early age, and I also have a writing degree, but I decided I was going to write a book.
Yeah.
I think almost everybody I've met wants to write a book, but I knew, I'm not any better than anybody else, but I'm just going to do it.
Yes.
Because that's most of the battle. I was going to say half, but it's just put the pen to paper, right?
Yeah.
Or typewriter. So I did it, and it was a journey. And I had blogged back in the day when bloggers were the thing, right?
Yeah.
And people had kind of liked it, and I was like, okay. So I put this book together and asked friends. You're one of them, beta readers and people, and it kind of has its own miracle story where I shopped it around a few times, and people were like, no, we don't want to do this. And so I was like, done. Yeah. And then my cousin was like, hey, I have a publishing company. You should send it to them. And so I was like, okay, I was done. I thought, I wrote it. It's done.
Right.
It doesn't need to go out there. Right. It really wasn't about everyone needs to have it.
Right.
And thank goodness that I had that feeling for the rest of the story. I was just like, it's enough that it's written. somebody can read it someday. My thoughts and my experience. I talk about Grant's gift in it. I talk about some of the things I learned. I talk about this concept of like building the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
I just imparted some of the wisdom that I had earned over time. And I was like, it's great, but no, who cares? Who wants to hear my story? Who's going to want to listen? Well, I sent it to this publishing company and it landed on the desk of the marketing publishing person was like a 28-year-old single.
Really?
And the editor was a 35-year-old recently divorced single female.
Interesting.
Both LDS. This was an LDS singles book.
Yeah.
It was originally called Single So What. We don't need to worry about what it's called now. But so I wrote the manuscript, I gave it to them, they loved it. I actually got to do the thing that I feel like everybody should have a chance to, but very few people do. I got to publish a book. So they did it. They changed the name. It's funny because I found out through the process that they also were one of the few distributors to Deseret Book. So I was like, oh, my book's going to go.
Yeah.
This is starting to sound like it's a successful story, right?
This is exciting.
I found the right people.
Right.
They're going to publish my book.
Right.
It's going to be at Deseret Book. It did end up Deseret Book.
Yeah.
We took some pictures.
Yes.
Guys, it bombed. I don't even know how to say without almost laughing how much of an epic fail. Meaning, I guess it depends on how you look at it. And I guess this is what I want to say about failure.
Yeah.
I didn't make a cent. Like I have had not one check. In fact, I got a lot of speaking opportunities. I did a book blog tour. This also tells you how long ago this was. I did podcast tours and blog tours. Yeah. And I went and spoke at a bunch of conferences. And at those conferences, they're like, yeah, bring your book. But I had to buy my book from myself because I remember I didn't self-publish.
Right.
So they spent the money.
So
when I was going to take books, they just didn't have books for me. So I had to buy them.
Right.
And then I didn't want to necessarily make money off of them because I wanted to have them at a discounted rate. So at these conferences, I sold them at what I bought them. So I didn't make money.
Right.
I bought them and then sold them.
Right.
Literally.
Right.
No money exchanging coming back to me.
Right.
And this process happened for a little while. And I remember one day sitting down and being like, I mean, I didn't really need it to be successful, but wow.
Yeah.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
It has gone negative. Like I have lost money in the process of this, right?
Yeah.
I didn't spend too much time thinking about that because I feel like failure is like, if you fail forward, it's the essence of resilience, right?
Oh, I love that.
And so I did think a few times, like in a business sense, this was just an epic fail. But I'll never forget, like it was years later, and I got this email from a girl, some random girl in some random house in Provo, downtown, like a BYU. I think I told you this. And she was like, I don't know if this will get to you because I don't know if you're your same email, but I was kind of having a hard time being single in Provo, older single in Provo. And I moved into this house and there was just a shelf of books that people had just left. And she's like, I came across your book and I read it and it was exactly what I needed right at the time of my life when I needed it. And it just has been such a blessing in my life. And I think she said some other things and I was like, that
right there.
That's it.
That's it.
It's just one person.
Yeah.
It wasn't an epic fail. It was just like your perspective.
Big time.
I think this wasn't necessarily a well that I built, but I went to BYU because I wanted to be a young ambassador. I saw them perform and I was like 10. They did the Ark, which was all these animals. And I fell in love and I said that day, my dad took me, I said, I'm going to be a young ambassador. And I didn't grow up in Utah. I grew up in Oregon, but I took dance. I was on a dance team. I mean, I took voice. Yeah. I grew up in this family of 8, so my mom said, you all have to take piano lessons, and I wanted to do voice so bad. My mom's like, well, if you do piano lessons, we'll pay for voice lessons. Right. So by necessity, I took voice lessons. I kept taking. Anyway, I went to BYU. I did not make it the summer before my freshman year. Yeah. I did not make it the summer after my freshman year for my sophomore year. I went on a mission, came back. Did not make it before my junior year. Did not make it before my senior year. And because of my mission worked out a certain way, actually I auditioned 5 times for young. I'm a 5-time
I love it.
failure as a young ambassador. And I actually knew Randy Booth at the time, who was the young ambassador. I knew his daughter because I had done stuff with her. I had been her counselor at EFY, and so I knew him. I remember one of the hardest things I ever did critical feedback wise was going into his office and basically, this is after like my third or fourth, being like, what can I do?
Yeah.
And him very kindly and lovingly basically saying, you will never be good enough. Like he didn't say it like that,
Right.
but he was like, your best is not enough. It was, I still auditioned twice after that. It was
Of course you did.
earth-shattering.
Get it, girl.
I was like, I will be a 5-year failure, but I will not let go of an opportunity to do this. And I look back on that, and I'm grateful that I had that. And I'm not sure why I had that much tenacity. Probably like
I
2 or
love
3
it.
times would have been enough. And if you know another well that I built in my life is a choir, I think God was saying, this isn't for you. But that doesn't mean music or dance or whatever isn't for you.
Absolutely.
If this configuration doesn't work, build your own. And
I love that.
I think that's what failure has gifted me is sort of like Carol Dweck talks about having like a fixed mindset or a growth mindset.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
The things that fail,
Yeah.
I'm going to leave them where they are.
Yeah.
I'm going to take what I can learn.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick up something else and I'm going to move forward. It doesn't mean it's not painful. It doesn't mean it's not lonely. I think some entrepreneurs and CEOs and people that start things are some of the loneliest people carrying the weight of the work
No
that
question.
happens.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to trivialize like failure, but I'm trying to say like, I guess I want to say, since we're talking about this, that one of the things that I feel like contributes to people being able to fail, because in order to fail, you have to try.
Right.
You have to put yourself out
No
there.
question.
Is having belonging and connection.
Yeah.
If you have a safety net, you can try and you can fail.
No question.
If you don't have a safety net, you're not putting your neck out there.
No
You're not
question.
trying something because you don't have the capacity to fail, right?
I love that.
So, yeah.
I think the tie-in is beautiful, and what I love about that is this idea that if we can build belonging spaces and create those opportunities for people to feel in those places that they can be tenacious
Yeah.
and fail,
Make it happen,
my
right?
gosh, like that's the bread and butter of like actually pushing through, I think, many parts of our lives, right? Because I remember someone asking me where I was so free with my thoughts. I was so like open and like felt like I could share what I was feeling. And I can remember I had a dad that gave me a safe space
Yeah.
very early in my life, that like what you think and what you feel it matters.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Allie, say what's up. So it's that idea.
Yeah.
I also love your statement of failing forward. It rings beautifully, because I have to put a plug in here, because I'm going to tell you right now, I loved your book.
Oh,
I loved it. And that's not even a bestie saying it. Like it had so many, it had all of you in it. And what I love is I bet there are many, many touch points of that book that may never be vocalized. And I think that's another piece about, if you fail forward, you're not looking back wondering if it's successful, because you're accepting what it's bringing you to. But I think that also brings out a cool concept that you don't even know what it has done.
Yeah.
Right? You're not looking back to see. You're just like, yeah, cool.
And
Let's
if
keep going.
people kind of tell me along the way, I feel grateful.
Yeah.
It's enough
Yeah.
that you did it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Check.
that it
Bomb.
brought the things,
Awesome.
right? And
Yes.
as soon as I learned that, it became more freeing to start something, because I
Yes.
wasn't so afraid to fail, because it was like, it's enough because it is the thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Big time. I love it. My gosh, everything you say, I love. I love it. Okay, so this is something that oh man, it is a gift of yours. I had an experience with you, and I have to share. And it ties into my question for you. So this was Arizona. I don't remember what year. And I was in a pretty dark place. I say that a lot, but it's fine. But in this particular place, we were at our home, and I remember needing to really process what I was experiencing, and I didn't know how. And I remember you coming into my room and being just a part of it with me. And during that time, I got really, after sharing my soul and feeling so uncomfortable about it, because it wasn't a pretty thing. It wasn't pretty. It was messy.
I call it our unspeakable things.
Yeah.
Right?
Whew, it was so vulnerable. And I just remember you saying the statement, like, Allie, you're absolutely fine. I'll hold your heart. Like, I'll hold your heart while you're doing this. Like, I remember the comfort that brought. I remember feeling this like connection to, one, I can be loved while I'm broken. And two, even if I don't have something, I can give back. I'm working on surviving.
Yeah.
Here is a friend that's willing to hold that and just be like, yeah, no, I'll hold your heart till you're ready, and I'll give it back to you, and you can give it back to others. The thing that shows up for me in that experience with you is this innate gift you had of showing love and like making that very known. You shared obviously that part of it that's from Grant, that gift that came with that. What else have you learned or experienced by making that such a high point of your life, of your living, is holding people's hearts and making sure to showcase that love to others? What has that brought out for you?
I think some of it, I think this is most people, what you want, you give.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I'm not different than most people. I want to be seen. I want to be loved. I want somebody to listen to me, like just be with me in my pain. I just, if I can do that, if I can give that to somebody, maybe it means that I was here and I made a mark on the world, right? I sometimes feel like I'm afraid that I'm just gonna whisk away. I don't know so there's something grounding that feels like having a family generational thing, right? Look at my family. I know you love your family. We're both from families of 8 kids, and the value that my parents have in that. And I don't have that. And there's such a grief in that. And so I feel like, if I can create safe places for people to speak their unspeakable things, maybe they'll do that for other people. I don't know that I do it for the sake of anything, but if not me, who? And because I know that once you do it, it's kind of addicting. Like once you create a safe space for somebody, and it's not about you at all. I think I worked really hard on it. It's not something that came natural. I worked really hard on listening. I worked really hard on taking myself out of the equation. I worked really hard on reflective listening. I worked really hard on not trying to answer the question before like thinking of my answer while you're talking, because that is not good listening. It's like, just listen all the way through. And then before you answer, say, tell me more. And that's very therapy sounding. But like even before I was a therapist, I was like, I think that becomes a little bit addictive too. It becomes like, I don't know, like a gift that I can give. It's something that I can give wherever I am. Right. And when you feel like you can't, what do I have to offer? And like, I don't know.
I love that.
Answered that.
I love that. Well, I think what I love about that, and it syncs up with my what we have talked about for so long. It is a purpose space. Right. It is a purpose space, and it is something that presents itself in, I think, one of the most beautiful belonging places. Is that if you have the gift to show up and sit in people's messes, hold their hearts, and show love, you can go anywhere. Like you can do anything. That's unstoppable.
I guess while you're talking, the other thing I want to say is this. If someone can say their most unspeakable things to you and you can still love them, that is soul changing.
It is.
Right? Like, and I have sat with some people, both as a therapist and as a friend, who have said things that they never thought they would say out loud because of how they felt like they'd be perceived or whatever. So if that's the worst thing that you could ever think or feel, and the person in front of you didn't blow up into flames or fall into the floor, and the person across from you didn't if the world didn't stop and you were still worthy, what does that say? Right? What does that say about you? And what does that say? And being able to be a reflection of that to people, to be steady, to be like, I love you no matter how messy you are, is also generative.
Big time.
Generative to me, right? It's very resilience building. It means you can be in some really crazy shiz and hold your space.
Well, and I think
because things become less crazy because you're like, you think that's crazy. What?
Well, and it's grounding. Like
very
in
grounding.
my mind, I'm like, that's the most grounding feeling when you feel like you're gonna lose your cookies any minute, and you like drop the bomb of like, I don't think I'm well. Like I'm
Yeah.
crazy right now, and having someone be like, rock on, cool, sounds good. Anything else you need, I'm here, and they bring in that normalization, or they just sit in the mess with you. I feel like my problem solving gets healthier because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you're not freaking out. Okay, well then, all right, I'll just keep going. Like I'll just keep maneuvering and I'll keep working within what I got. And so it's very
Which I guess I
grounding.
want to, one more thing I want to say on that is when you don't solve someone's problem, when you hold their heart, when you sit with them, you unintentionally, maybe intentionally gift them that they're capable of solving their
Oh
problems,
my gosh, yes.
right?
Yes.
Like you don't have to even say that, but you are not trying to solve it. You're not trying to make it nice. You're not trying to make it even feel better. They're just messy. The gift you give that person is that they're not as fragile as they thought they
they're
were,
capable.
right? When people come in and rescue, or when they come in and try to make nice, or they try to make you less ugly, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Here's some Kleenexes.
You're
Here's
making me
whatever.
uncomfortable, so I need you to
Yeah. Or even like I feel compelled that I need to
Sure.
make you feel better.
Yeah.
That's about them, not about the person, right?
Yeah.
When you can just sit with them, that's the best gift you can give somebody. It says to them, like, I know you're capable. You're having a really hard time right now, but you have everything you need inside of you. I'll be here. You can borrow from me, borrow some love, borrow some light, borrow some steady.
Yep.
No worries, right? Like, I got you, and you got it.
Yeah.
Right? And what a gift.
Yeah.
To receive from people, but also to give to people because
Right.
because you believe it, because you're sitting next to them and you know, like, this is a moment, and this moment is not your life. It's a moment in time. We are not defined by our worst moments, right?
No. I love that. Well, and I can attest, I got a product of that with you. And to be candid, it assisted me in wanting to hold other people's hearts, right? It assisted in that part of me really eager to build that resilience because I wanted to do that for others. Hence our experience in our prior discussion about you sharing vulnerability and me being like, oh, do I get to do this now? What's up? You know, like, okay, yeah. I feel like, you know, my last question or thought as we kind of talk about, you know, full circle, right? All these spaces that have contributed to this beautiful belonging place. I would love for you to share one thing or two things that have been really hard about building and creating, especially the belonging place space. What's been challenging?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a hard question. I think when you become somebody that people rely on to be steady and strong and be a good listener, that's like your role. Everyone, like, I'm the funny person. I'm the this person. I think people see you as more capable than you are. And maybe for the most part you are, or they are. If we're talking about me, I think I authentically am, for the most part, feel so grateful. When you build things, you can fall back on them, right? They become generative for yourself. So I feel like it's additive. But also it's just like exhausting.
Yeah.
It's just somebody else build it already.
Can I just show up to the party and get some treats and kick it? Can I just do that?
I think I shifted in my 30s and in my 40s where I was like, it's someone else's turn. Somebody who's younger and somebody who has like got the gung ho like I had. I think that's okay, right? I think I think it's hard to feel alone surrounded by incredible people.
You bet.
Like I want a person and I want to be a mother, and that clock is all but done, like ticking, right? And I think it's been really hard to grieve things I don't have. I think for some people they call this ambiguous loss, but it's like how do you grieve when you don't have kids, but you grieve that? How do you grieve that even if I got married tomorrow, I've had 20 years without somebody, and that when I meet that person, I will probably love them so much and I will be so excited and I will miss the last 20 years of their life, right? Like that kind of grief is wild because it's like, what is that called? And what do you do? And do I think that I've done a lot of things and have I gained a lot of experience? Yes. Nothing compared to what it would be like to have be in a marriage.
Yeah.
The growth that you have when somebody's right there,
Yeah.
good and bad, right? The reflection they are of you, the critical feedback they are,
Yeah.
but that the way that the sharpening of the hearts of the saws, it's just like the person you become. It is not lost on me that I can build 1,000,000 wells and not have that. That is a sacred thing. Now, I don't idolize that. I don't think that every marriage and every person's person is amazing, right?
Sure,
This
sure.
is not a faulty, this is just a deep knowledge that says we're meant to have this person. And that the growth that you have from being a mother or a father, like the parts of your soul that go into that, I can do as many things as I've done, and I feel great about the things I've done in my life, but there is such a loss in that because I haven't been raising kids or because I don't have my heart's desire, that I've done other things. But as good as those things are, and I don't want to take away from them because I love them, they just feel less sometimes. And then I get upset because it's like, they're not less.
Yeah. Right.
It's your path. It's meant to always be your path. This is who you are.
Right.
And I have this dialogue. It's
Yeah,
like, you should be so grateful. You have a house and you have a car and you have a job. And God has blessed you with so much. And then I think, but I can be sad. I can be, and there's this internal dialogue that says, just grieve it and be present and sit in it and then move forward. Right. I have this part of me that says, like, it doesn't help to be a victim. It doesn't help to like sit in it, but it's okay to take some times and seasons. I think, to answer your question, other things that I think that are really hard is that there's just so much, I call it the paperwork side of it. There's just so much stuff behind the scenes when you build wells. Like I have this choir that down in Arizona, it's been going for 12 years and up here 5 years, but like every season, like we have to order shirts. And just for example, we get shirts and we have to find a place for our retreat. And we have every year, new year, we have to find firesides. Like we have to do auditions. Like this is just the tip of the iceberg, but sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? It's so much work and and unappreciative. Seemingly, right?
Sure.
And I have some partners and of course they get it, but like it's just like, is it worth it? The train is so hard to build. And some of the trains you have to build. That there are times when I'm just like, I mean, on the other side of all of those things that are hard are the like lives that are changed in the choir. Like one person, if one person comes closer to Christ, if one person doesn't commit suicide, which has happened, if one person comes out as gay and brings their girlfriend or boyfriend to the choir and they stay in the choir because they still believe in God.
Right.
So I guess I would say even the hardest parts to me have, Brene Brown would say, don't silver lining it. But I would say have silver linings. Isn't that crazy? That even in our worst moments, I think if we can see God or we can attribute, if we can be grateful for what we have, it's just like sort of makes it okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing. What would you tell the Kylee 10 years from now? You asked me that question.
I know. Okay.
10 years from now, babes, what would you say? What would you encourage?
I think I'm struggling and trying to learn how to not find value in being a producer. Like, I feel part of it's my ADHD, but I feel this revved up engine to build wells, to produce, to start a podcast after I've done a thing. I'd like to think that those come from really good places and that they're inspired, but I also would tell my future self that you're just valuable if you never produce another thing. If you never create another thing, like it's enough. Like you've done enough. There's enough value. There's enough legacy. There's enough connection. You have worked hard enough that if you just stopped showing up, people would show up for you. Like they would love on you. I want to tell my future self to stop freaking out about being alone in different stages of my life. Because I think my 22-year-old self would have freaked out at my 44-year-old self being single, just freaked out. And my 44-year-old self sort of looks at myself at 50 or 60 and it's just like, nope. How do I do single? Like, I don't know how to do single. I don't know how to retire. because a big part of my life is my job. And
Yeah.
what happens when I'm done with my job?
What does that look like?
What does that look like? And I want to say to myself, hey, Kylee, it's the same thing when you were 20 to when you were 40.
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
you will make new
Day by day.
friends.
Yeah.
You will have the same friends.
Yeah.
You have friendships that aren't just single. You have married friends and family. You will have your family always.
Yeah.
You will find someone who will want to live little old grannies together with you, right? You will maybe find someone who's already raised their kids and wants to settle in rocking chairs. Like, there's a whole unexplored future life that you just like don't worry. And the biggest worry is that like God has got you. Yeah. Even though you wrestle with him because it's like, but can you just do it the way I want?
Yeah, straight up. Let's have a conversation. Let's chat.
Could you just do?
Yeah.
Like, it's always worked out. And even when it hasn't worked out, well, there's always been a way to learn and grow from that. And usually all those, for me, I'll just speak for me, come out of relationships. So when I worry about being alone or lonely, I think I'm the common denominator in my life. So I give myself, my 56-year-old self, the challenge to just continue to put out value in people, and it will come back.
Like, that literally could be put on a pillow. Like, we could literally cross stitch that and that would be the end. Amazing. Thank you.